Hi, everybody. I'm Renee. So happy to be here. Yes, my mom and son are here. I am Trinidadian. We roll deep wherever we go. So you get one, you get many. I'm so thrilled to be here in this beautiful, beautiful place and speaking with you about some of my research. So, although we're here in the south of France, I'm going to transport you to my lab, to Cambridge, which is not as beautiful, but certainly when it comes to AI, beautiful from my perspective. So I want to show you on your screen a smattering of the ways in which firms are talking about AI. The two questions I'm most often asked is, how should we be using AI best, and what should my kid study in school? And I'm going to answer both of those questions with today's talk. But if you look at this first image, you see a variety of organizations talking about how they deploy AI. And one thing you see that they all have in common is that they all talk about being, as a strategic advantage, AI first. Now, when I hear AI first, I always wonder, well, if AI is first, then who's second? And so when Sharon asked me to talk about how AI can ensure that humans have an edge, I was really excited because my focus is at MIT maximizing AI's potential by being human first. So at MIT, I lead the Human First AI group, where we do research that has the perspective. And the perspective is, in order for us to maximize the potential of the tools that we develop, we need to, number one, understand how humans will approach these tools. Because if you build a better mousetrap but nobody trusts it, nobody sees the benefit or the value, well, then they're not going to actually use it. But the other aspect to this perspective is we should always be asking first, how is this going to help humans, right? And that's a human first perspective. And so with my research, it's sort of at the center of three concentric circles. The first is behavioral science, understanding how humans make decisions and the circumstances under which their decisions are optimal and the circumstances under which not so much. So if you've ever read Thinking Fast and Slow, that kind of work undergirds the way in which we see how people deem the value of these tools. And if you've started reading Thinking Fast and Slow and haven't completed the book, that's okay. You're in company with most people. I'm not sure I've ever met a person who's read it all the way through, but you get the main idea from Thinking Fast and Slow. Now, the next overlap is artificial intelligence, and I'm using that as a catch-all phrase to include everything from machine learning to large language models, Gen AI, to algorithms in general. This idea that we can outsource cognitive load to technological products to allow us to make decisions more quickly. And the overlap between behavioral science and artificial intelligence that I care about is, under what circumstances does the inclusion of AI lead to better judgments, and when does it not? And then the last circle is market strategy. So what does this mean for trust in one company or one organization versus another? And how can we use this understanding to leverage the labor force as well as better please our stakeholders and our customers? So I want to start off with an image from a book, a Dr. Seuss book, that I actually read to my son, called The Sleep Book. If you have young children, I highly recommend it. They'll be asleep by the time you get to the end of the book. But this image stuck out to me. And being a woman, and in particular being a mom, has inspired so much of my research. I've started doing this research in 2016. And it really was inspired by my son and thinking about the world that he was growing up in and seeing him use technologies. And in this Dr. Seuss book, this page really stuck out, and it says, counting up sleepers, just how do we do it? Really quite simple. There's nothing much to it. We find out how many, we learn the amount by an audio-teleo-talio count. On a mountain, halfway between Reno and Rome, we have a machine in a plexiglass dome, which listens and looks into everyone's home. And whenever it sees a new sleeper go flop, it jiggles and lets a new biggle ball drop. Our chap counts these balls as they plop in a cup. And that's how we know who is down and who is up. Now, in this Dr. Seuss book, written many, many years before the advent of AI, you see this image of a machine that's almost mystical, a black box, if you will, that is somehow in everyone's home and counting who is asleep and who is not. And we have the pseudo-human who sits there receiving the count and just tallies the biggle ball. And so when I see this image, I wonder, perfect machine intelligence. We need a human to intervene. Thank you for that wonderful demonstration of the importance of humans. Thank you, right? Wonderful. That's pretty much it, right? We still need humans for the edge. And so when you see this machine and you see this biggle ball counter sitting there, the question becomes, is the human doomed to just become the tallyman for the biggle ball drop, where all of the thinking is done by a machine that's in all of our homes, and they just sit there tallying? Is that going to be our fate as we have the rise of artificial intelligence? And with my research, I try to evolve this narrative of replacement or substitution and really focus on why humans are critical to the optimization of technology, as was so aptly demonstrated just now. So I want to share with you some of my research. Mini lecture. I'll try to keep the Greek letters and math to a minimum. But I want to share with you just a couple of studies to take with you as you think about the way in which AI can provide an advantage, and in particular, humans are critical for this. So with regard to content creation, the question is, does human involvement or AI involvement in the creation of content make a difference in terms of how it's received by an audience? Would this affect the two dependent variables of interest here, which is quality and how persuasive it is? So if you're in advertising, when it comes to content, being persuasive is really important. But if you're a writer, the perception of the quality of that content is also critical. So I use experiments, that is my methodology, and we had 4 experimental conditions. And people were randomly assigned, audience members, to one of 4 experimental conditions. In the first experimental condition, they read the content that was generated by a professional human. So the human was given essentially a prompt and asked to write some advertising copy and then created this copy. In the second experimental condition, we gave the same prompt to generative AI and received the copy. In the third experimental condition, we started off with Gen AI and then gave that content to the human to then edit and polish in the final edit. And in the fourth condition, we flipped it. So we had the human start the writing, and then we had the AI edit and polish what the human wrote. With these 4 experimental conditions, my question is, which one would be more persuasive? Which one would be perceived as higher in quality by the audience? And the answer, as is the answer with all science, it depends. When people are not informed about the authorship, turns out AI does a really good job. AI alone, or AI as the final editor after a human, is deemed highest in quality and more persuasive in that people are willing to pay more for the product. But when people become informed about the authorship, we see the inclusion of humans lead to a rise in that perceived quality and in that persuasiveness, such that that difference goes away. Now, this paper was published in the journal Judgment and Decision Making by Oxford University Press with my doctoral student, Jerry, and we entitled this Human Favoritism, Not AI Aversion, because what we see here is a bump knowing that a human was involved, not a hit knowing that AI was involved. What this means then in terms of evolving our perspective on human versus AI or substitution, is that audiences value human involvement. There is a benefit to this. And so, if you have humans involved when you're using AI to generate content, you should talk about it. you should let people know. Because much like couture is perceived as being higher in value because someone made it, well, content generated with humans involved also is more persuasive and more considered higher in quality. All right, let me share with you one more. The evolution of perspective on AI with regard to speed. If you're in marketing at all, the idea of frictionless experiences is something no doubt you've heard before. In fact, in managerial circles, the word friction is sort of synonymous with pain point. People say things like, we have friction here we need to get rid of, or there's some friction, as if it's a bad thing. However, when it comes to AI, adding strategic friction, we find, can maintain the speed, but also improve the accuracy to provide an edge. So let me give you an example with an experiment. Imagine that you are generating content, and in this experiment, we worked with a multinational firm that is in a variety of countries, so this is a global result. And the people who work at this firm have to generate content, reports for clients and things of that nature. And so we had them use generative AI in this process because the firm said, well, maybe it'll help them create those reports more efficiently. Now, we experimented with this and had people randomly assigned to 3 experimental conditions. In the first condition, people received the Gen AI output, but we gave them some information about that. So much like a traffic light, we gave them highlighted parts that said, this part in red looks like it could be wrong. This part in yellow may be an omission from the prompt. You might want to have a second look. And this part in green looks pretty good. Proceed. Now that was one experimental condition, and we called that engineered friction, where we gave them more cognitive load, more things to think about before deploying the content generated by AI. In the second experimental condition, we had medium friction, which was a lighter cognitive load. So the things that we said, this looks wrong, or you might want to have a second look. And in the final condition, this was the control. So this was like what you would get when you use ChatGPT, for example, today. No highlighting, no labels, completely friction-free. Proceed as you see fit. The question then we asked is, which of these 3 experimental variables would change the numbers of errors that were missed and also affect the amount of time spent? By adding cognitive speed bumps, spoiler alert, we find that you can actually reduce the number of errors and preserve the speed. Here's what it looks like. We have these 3 experimental conditions: full friction, medium friction, and no friction. And what we find is you can resolve this perceived trade-off between accuracy and speed by adding strategic friction at various touch points. These, what we call cognitive speed bumps, engage the human in critical thinking. This is important because we're finding that as people use generative AI more and more, their critical thinking muscles sort of are not engaged. They become reliant on it. And so by having people intentionally engage in critical thinking, you can gain the benefits of AI, but also preserve the human skill. We also find that this is important because human beings anchor on generative AI content. 60 to 80% of the content generated by AI is relied upon by the human, meaning what the human ultimately presents is identical to Gen AI by 60 to 80%. This phenomenon is called anchoring. Humans anchor on Gen AI output. So adding cognitive speed bumps so you can actually engage critical thinking helps you not anchor too heavily on Gen AI output and preserves the human's fresh ideas and individual thinking. So AI is powered by neural networks, and they follow patterns. And that's what makes it amazing, because it can combine interesting patterns. So if I say stomp, stomp, clap, yes, you picked up the pattern. Hard to do on grass, but you get it. The stomp is harder on grass. Humans pick up those patterns. You got it right away. AI picks up those patterns too, and it uses a neural network to predict based on that pattern that after stomp, stomp comes clap. Thank you. Wonderful. Good job. And as a result, it can do cool things like this. So you can see here Brickit, which is a machine learning powered Lego tool. So if you're a parent and you have loads of Legos in your house, or you like Legos yourself, after you've made your sculpture and you want to think about fresh new sculptures, you can use machine learning to scan your bin of Legos, and it can come up with completely new patterns, give you the instructions on how to make them. This is why AI is very cool. But the thing about AI is, though it follows these patterns, it may follow patterns that are more complex in the real world. So here is Midjourney. Midjourney, and this is what it thinks professors in different fields look like, based on the data it was trained on and the patterns that exist. But of course, you know not all professors look like this. Here I am right in front of you, and you'll hear from another from MIT actually very soon. And so we need to be careful about anchoring on AI because it can shape what people believe is possible. And what is possible for the future is not necessarily what has already happened in the past. So the human edge that we provide when using these AI tools is preserving our critical thinking, not relying or outsourcing it. So I have some homework for you. I'm a professor. Sorry, hard habits die hard. When you leave here today and you think about AI and your use of it, think about the benefits of adding cognitive speed bumps. Friction can be your friend. If you are driving, especially on one of these winding roads, without friction, you lose control and things end up badly. We're on a windy road now. Think about adding cognitive speed bumps for greater control when it comes to AI. Signal if you are creating content for audiences that humans were involved. It makes it more trustworthy to know that at some point a human was overseeing and involved in what people are reading. Embrace a culture of experimentation. All of these insights were quite different than what you would ask people in a survey. Test, test again, and test again. Behavioral data is the most predictive, and that's why experiments are so powerful. And beware confirmation bias from AI. When you're inviting AI as almost a teammate, remember AI is programmed to agree with you. But you don't always want that. You want different opinions and critical thinking. The fact of the matter is that most of the AI out there is not developed by nerds like me. 96% of it is out there from companies. And so it's not me who's creating the future, actually, it's you. So I ask you, when you think about your use of AI, ask yourself, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? We are literally creating a world with AI. I hope that you will make the best decisions and remember always to be human first. Thank you, everybody. So if there are any questions, I think I can take a couple. Are we good for a question, one or two? All right. Yes, the gentleman in the red hat. Well, you are 8 years old, but I'll talk about it back at home. Thanks for your question. Any other questions from the audience or observations? All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll be around. Thank you.